Ancient Rome, around 90 AD. It's a time of legendary heroes, notorious emperors, and gigantic spectacles.
Chariot racing was by far the most popular sport in ancient Rome.
As passed down by many ancient sources.
There's this excitement, there's the fans going crazy.
The charioteers were huge superstars.
And he was the greatest, Scorpus.
Scorpus rose up from slavery and achieved immortality.
Experimental archaeology reveals astonishing details.
This is not like the Ben-Hur chariots. This is a sleek racing machine.
Rome, the eternal city. For nearly a millennium, its rulers dictated every facet of life across much of the known world. By 90 AD, the empire is reaching the peak of its power. It's 30 years since large parts of the city burned down under Nero. Rome's current emperor, Domitian, has undertaken an ambitious and far-reaching program of urban renovation. The court poet Martial proclaims, "The city of Rome, under Domitian, is like a phoenix, rising again from the ashes." Domitian is the third emperor of the Flavian dynasty and is deeply disliked by the Senate and the Roman elite. However, he maintains huge popularity amongst the people.
Rome in 90 AD is the capital of a huge empire, and it's a huge city, 1 million inhabitants, which by pre-industrial standards is enormous. No city gets to that size until London in about 1800. So everywhere there were people, there were crowds.
To keep the masses entertained, the Flavians put on a series of annual spectacles, the Ludi Romani, the Roman Games. And with his poet laureate, Martial, Domitian has the perfect PR consultant.
I think spectacles are a big thing of the Flavian brand. The epigrams written by a Martial, which were written to commemorate the spectacles put on by the Flavians, including the inaugural games at the Colosseum under Titus. And so clearly it's part of the brand. There's an association of having given Rome back to the people after the dreaded Nero, and he's continuing this association.
The greatest spectacles the emperor can give to the people are the chariot races. They are preceded by a series of opulent and grandiose celebrations.
It was obviously great fun, the huge thrill of the excitement. It was a day to take your children, for a father to take his son and teach him all the tricks of the trade about how to be a good charioteer.
Prior to the event, a huge procession moves through the city. The whole of Rome is on their feet.
Domitian wants to be seen to be popular, and he wants to be seen to be giving people the kind of entertainment that they really loved.
By then, Rome is the greatest city on earth. And the Circus Maximus is by far the largest structure ever built in the Roman Empire. 3 times the size of the Olympic Stadium in Berlin. Many emperors strove to embellish it, and thereby to leave their mark. Domitian has even added an imperial box, which allows him direct access from his palace.
The Circus Maximus is the Roman circus. It was the most famous known in the whole Roman Empire. It's the biggest, the oldest. This circus where you would want to be. From the outside, you would see this monumental building, but then if you go inside, you'd be in a completely different world. 150,000 people around you. The noise, the smells of animals competing. Maybe you could even smell the fear of some of the young charioteers. And you could probably also smell the latrines in the stands.
First and foremost are the Ludi Romani, the Roman games, which are held in honor of the gods. In particular, Jupiter, the protector of the state and the laws. For the occasion, his statue would be removed from the temple of Jupiter and solemnly paraded with other gods through the bustling streets of the city.
Religion is embedded into every part of Roman society. So games, war, whatever thing the Roman state did, religion was involved. And so you've got to remember, if the emperor is presiding over the games, so are the gods.
In true lavish Flavian style, this is no ordinary event. It's called the Pompa Circensis, the circus parade.
There was this amazing procession that went through the city of Rome, known as the Pompa. We get our word pomp from this. And this is a really huge and impressive procession that snakes its way through the city of Rome and ends up at the Circus Maximus.
A Greek historian, Dionysius of Halicarnassus, has given a detailed description of the Pompa.
Pompa was received by the crowd, and they were crying for the emperor. They were crying for Domitian. You are our hero. You organize for us these great festivals.
It's a mile-long pageant displaying the whole spectrum of Roman society, featuring not only gods, but also actors, musicians, athletes, and benefactors. It's a day when no one stays at home. But the true stars of the parade are the charioteers. And one in particular holds near legendary status, even in his lifetime: Scorpus. In the Museo Lapidario in Urbano, Italy, there is a remarkable piece of evidence which reveals who this champion was and shows the extent of his fame. American archaeologist Sinclair Bell has studied it in detail.
At first sight, this monument doesn't look like anything special. At the top, what we see is the deceased himself at a funerary banquet, holding a wreath and being crowned by a small Cupid-like figure. Like other Romans, the idea seems to be that he wants to be seen celebrating the high life. We have here a dedication to the gods of the underworld, and it tells us that the monument was dedicated to Titus Flavius Abascantus, he was a clerk of the courts, and that the tomb was set up by his wife, Flavia Hesperis. But what makes this monument really special is the scene that we have here. The charioteer with his 4 horses in a quadriga. Now we know that it's the charioteer's name is inscribed over his image, Scorpus. Along with that, we have the names of his 4 horses, Ingenuus, Admetus, Passerinus, and Admetus. So here we have the tombstone for a Roman bureaucrat, commemorated by his wife with the image of the sports hero of his day. But why? The image of Scorpus isn't just alluding to her husband's favorite sports hero. He's actually acting as a kind of good luck charm or talisman.
Scorpus was immortalized by Martial. O Rome, I am Scorpus, the glory of your noisy circus, the object of your applause.
The charioteers were huge superstars, and because of their celebrity status, even the emperors would like to associate themselves with them. Now, partly this was because it would mean that some of the glamour would rub off on them. It also reminded people of who was paying for all this entertainment. But perhaps above all, it showed that the emperor shared the passions and the enjoyment of the people, that he had something of the common touch about him.
In ancient Rome, the world of entertainment and the sphere of power are closely interconnected, with emperors and public idols sharing a common platform.
Hail be with you, Caesar.
And may victory be with you, Scorpus. If you survive the race.
Yet the question of who is the biggest star makes personal interaction between emperor and champion a tricky business. Martial, while idolizing Scorpus, is very clear that the games are in honor of Domitian and would be nothing without him. There with our eyes and minds are we, Caesar. So utterly do you alone hold the thoughts of all that the very crowd of the great circus knows not whether Passerinus runs. Passerinus is one of Scorpus's horses and enjoys a degree of fame and veneration that even rivals the emperor's public standing.
One of the most famous terms to come out of the Roman world is panime circenses, bread and circuses, which basically means keep the masses fed, keep them entertained, and they will be happy, they will be pleased with who's in control, and they're not going to revolt or riot against you because they'll be too distracted by everything that's going on, and they're not going to have empty stomachs to be angry.
The games are a huge political barometer, since this time of the year is the only occasion when the emperor can gauge how he is perceived by the masses. The satyrs, mythological companions of the wine god Dionysus, represent the rowdier elements of the pompa, where their subversive nature takes charge for a day. The hierarchy of the world is turned upside down, with satyrs conversing directly with the emperor, making fun of him. The emperor would normally accept the challenge as part of a popular burlesque, keeping the crowd duly amused. But even the satyrs could go too far. Though all classes came to admire Scorpus, chariot racing as a profession is regarded as improper for high-born Roman citizens, since charioteers come from the humblest of backgrounds.
It's yours.
Scorpus started out as a slave, the lowest position in society. The vast majority of the charioteers began this way.
So, what do I hear for a guy like this one?
Rome was a slave society, and slave markets were fundamental to the economy and to everyday life throughout the empire.
Then this boy here is strong and already able to work.
Historians have estimated that up to a quarter of its population was made up of slaves.
And what about this beauty?
She's just what I need. I'll take her.
How much then?
Well, all I've got.
Anyone else?
In the British School of Rome, archaeologist Sinclair Bell has found some interesting evidence on the background of charioteers.
This book is the Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum, or the Corpus of Latin Inscriptions. One of the things that this book does is tell us about the social and legal background of charioteers, including information that we can glean from their names. For example, we have the inscription of Crescens, and this inscription tells us that he was a charioteer. He died at the age of 22, and so we can work out that he began racing at the age of just 13, and thus his career probably would have started when he was about age 10. We can also get information about his legal background. All Roman citizens would have had a three-part name, or trianomina, but Crescens has just one name, which tells us that he was born a slave and that he died a slave.
The collection of Latin inscriptions yields yet another interesting discovery. A few pages later, there is a record of a relief from the tomb of Diocles, another of the great names in chariot racing. It lists many victorious champions of his era, and one special mention goes to one Flavius Scorpus. The fact that Diocles honors Scorpus so prominently tells us how famous he was at the time. The inscription even documents the number of his victories, 2,048. Yet it tells even more about him as a person.
Even a short name like Flavius Scorpus is really informative. He lacks the three-part name of a Roman citizen. Flavius refers to his former master, and Scorpus tells us that he's probably of Eastern European origin.
Scorpus was almost certainly born into slavery, since by the 1st century AD, the lands of Eastern Europe had been conquered by the Roman armies.
Go on, boy.
Slaves were property without any rights of their own.
Life as a Roman slave could be exceedingly difficult, especially since the master of the household had free rein to do whatever he wanted.
Working on a farm would have been very common for a slave boy. He would toil for long days filled with back-breaking work and little prospect of any change ahead. Yet there is a beacon of hope.
One of the distinctive features of slavery in Rome compared to slavery in Greece is that a slave had a possibility of freedom. And so this is built into the system, and it's part of the way in which Roman slavery works. So slaves could be bought and sold, they could be bred on your own estate, but also you could hope if you got lucky, especially if you were a household slave, a city slave, that you might work your way up and buy your freedom at the end of it all.
Some wealthy Romans keep racing stables. And this is where Scorpus might have come into contact with the exciting world of the charioteers. Is this the chance for a way out of his miserable existence as a slave?
One charioteer who survived to retirement age after 1,000 wins was Communist, and he went on to train young talent.
And there are other veterans of the circus, albeit rather few, who had survived their active career. Under their critical eyes, a whole pool of striving youngsters is learning the ropes, all clinging to the hope that one day they might get their big break and become a charioteer.
Nearly all charioteers started off as slaves. They were sold into the business by stable owners, and they were keen to do it because it was an opportunity to win freedom, to win money, to win glory, above all to get out of the daily grind of being an ordinary slave.
Steady, steady.
But the path to freedom and fame is one of sweat and pain. Like many others, Scorpus probably started off as a stable boy. Not all of them would have what it takes to master a chariot. More than anything else, the job requires a fine sense for horses. A rare enough gift, but indispensable when it comes to controlling the steeds in the heat of the races. They must obey and trust their driver and react to the tiniest adjustment of the reins. Scorpus seems to have shown a special talent in handling the sensitive animals. But a successful charioteer also needs great skill and a body of steel.
For a trainer, always the question, is my pupil the right one? Shall he be a great victor? And in the case of Scorpus, it was right.
He must be prepared for everything. Accidents are rife. There is not only the danger of flying off at bends, some daredevils even risk a collision to force their opponents out of the race. Your life might depend on being able to keep your balance. Charioteering is not for the faint of heart.
Being a charioteer was a dangerous business. You could be killed or you could be badly wounded in one of the crashes that often happened in the circus. But it didn't matter in a way. There were always other slaves who were willing to fill the role of those charioteers. They were expendable items for the people who actually controlled the business of the circus.
Many charioteers start training as young as 8 or 10. Yet before they are entrusted with a proper chariot, they have to undergo years of intensive instruction as a driver, constantly learning from others. After all, chariots are most expensive. Yet the attraction of races was such that they never ceased to capture the imagination. Poets describe their splendor, and their traces can still be found throughout the city of Rome. To this day, when we think of the ancient Roman world, the chariot race comes instantly to mind. Due to the mass appeal of the games, there are some astonishing leftovers. Even back then, there was merchandising, fan articles and children's toys which were on offer in the stalls outside the circus.
No, not this one. Put it down again.
The boy will just love it.
Look here. How much?
3 sesterces.
That's pretty.
It's to one of those toys that we owe our knowledge of how exactly the ancient chariots were built.
Thanks. We'll take it.
2,000 years ago, this was the pride and joy of a Roman child. It was found in the Tiber River at the end of the 19th century.
This is the most brilliant thing. It's a contemporary model, beautifully made. You can see by its detail that the man who made that knows exactly what he was looking at and is very skilled in making a copy of what he saw. Luckily he chose bronze, so it's lasted this long, and it's showing us how they made the full-size ones. Parts of it are bound to be wood. It's going to be a lightweight thing, and it's just a brilliant design.
Robert Herford has an ambitious plan. To build a fully workable replica based on the find from the Tiber. Robert is a renowned craftsman when it comes to reconstructing ancient vehicles. First step, the frame. A solid strip of wood is exposed to hot steam for several hours until it becomes malleable. It's a time-honored technique, and just the way the Romans would have done it.
We've got to be fast with this, because if the heat goes out of the wood, it won't bend.
The frame is made up of 2 wooden strips bent into horseshoe form and then covered with leather. One strip will later become the platform for the driver. The other one serves as a kind of railing at the front. Bending the wood requires a lot of know-how and a sure touch to avoid the formation of cracks.
The fibres we've softened, they've slid over one another, and as they cool down and harden, they will solidify in that shape, so the thing will retain the shape that we've given it.
Having cooled off for 2 hours, the wooden strips are assembled, and the basic structure of the chariot takes shape. Next step, the wheels. This, above all, is a matter of precision. The wooden parts, the spokes, the hub and the segments of the wheel must be interlocked without a millimetre to spare. The model for this wheel was found in Scotland and could be dated back to 142 AD. Its spokes were made of ash, the hub of elm wood. Now it's time to address the iron hoops. First, Robert must measure the precise circumference of the wheel and then apply the data to the iron band. Again, absolute precision is paramount. Once ready, the hoop must fit the wheel perfectly. The metal is welded into a circle and then heated. That way, it will widen and can be put onto the wheel. While cooling off, it will retract and tighten around the wood. To keep the chariot as light as possible, the Romans strung it with leather.
At this point, if you dry it, it becomes hard, then it shrinks quite a bit. And those two properties are what make it useful for us at this stage.
The leather railings serve to protect the driver from dust and stones thrown up by the horses in front. Apart from that, the cover of leather provided a design of great elasticity and acted as a shock absorber. And there it is, a Roman chariot. For Scorpus, however, all this is merely a dream. He is still one of the nameless myriads of slaves, toiling to increase their owner's wealth while longing for another life.
And this one. I'll be the greatest of them all. Yeah. You see me? I'll be the greatest charioteer. No one will ever beat me. Huh?
We don't know exactly when Scorpus embarked on his career as a charioteer. We can say, however, that at some time or other one of the racing stables took him on as a promising young talent. Maybe his skills in handling horses caught the attention of an experienced trainer, impressed by the boy's physical strength and displays of courage.
Like horses?
Yeah.
Chariots too?
Yeah.
Want to drive one? Then come along tomorrow. I'll show you something.
Charioteers had to be trained. They might be talent spotted at a young age, but they then had to be taught how to drive a chariot. They had to be taught all the tactics that they needed to survive in a race. And for that, they must have looked to retired charioteers, people who knew the ins and outs of the industry, who would be able to really teach them everything they needed to know in order to compete in the circus.
The young slave's dream of becoming a champion leads him right into the hub of the Roman entertainment world. It's a multi-million business of cultic proportions, which impregnates the Romans' everyday life and civilization way beyond the circus.
The popularity of circus racing is just written into the material and literary evidence of the Roman world. It appears everywhere, on people's tombstones, in the mosaics they commissioned in their houses, in the literature of the time. The metaphors appear even in the writings of those elite authors who claim to disprove of it. So really, the cultural importance of chariot racing, I think, cannot be overestimated.
As is exemplified by the mosaics in the Bardo Museum in Tunis, North Africa. Historian Carolyn Willikers has researched the importance of horses in ancient cultures. The large-scale mosaics give a detailed image of what went on in the circus, and a proof of the popularity of the races.
So what we're looking at is a 6th century mosaic. So it's from a later period, it's Byzantine, but it shows a traditional circus scene. And it shows a lot of the characters, the individuals that we would expect to see in such a scene, and it gives us, again, a good idea of the architecture of the traditional Roman circus. One of the things that is unique about this mosaic is that it does depict the audience, but it's an unusual depiction of the audience because they're very passive, which is not what it would have been like. If you read any of the literary descriptions of a day at the races, you know, there's this excitement, there's the fans going crazy, yelling and jumping up and down and urging on their teams and almost riding along with the drivers. But what this image of the audience does show us is it gives us an idea of how popular racing is, right? This was the biggest spectator sport in the Roman world. It was sort of just a huge part of Roman social activity across the empire.
The charioteers, of course, were the stars. Yet they needed adequate horses in great numbers. Horses like those still being bred here in Tunisia.
We know that given the importance of the circus, the Roman circus, throughout the Roman Empire, that thousands of horses were being produced because you needed a huge volume of horses to run a single day of races. One of the reasons we know that North Africa was producing some of the best and some of the largest number of racehorses, but also some of the best racehorses in the Roman world, is because of inscriptions like this one right here. It's basically recording part of the career of a charioteer named Avidius Teres, and it's from the 1st century AD, and it's a list of horse names. And they have names like Romulus, Dromo, and 37 of these 42 names have the initials AF after them, which means Africa.
The charioteers of antiquity were looking for horses that combine speed, strength, and endurance. The very characteristics displayed by the Berber horses even today. They are the oldest breed in the Mediterranean basin. Khadija is an expert on Berber horses and knows their distinctive features.
What are the physical characteristics that identify a barb from other horses?
The first thing is the head. So the head is very typical, especially for a convex profile.
Okay, so the head comes out.
Yeah, comes out. The eye is like an almond.
An almond, okay.
Yeah, and the nose, the nostril are not square like Arabian horses.
More angled, more rounded.
Yeah.
And what about, he's got a very unique looking neck.
Yeah, very beautiful neck. It's thin and large. It's very strong.
Very strong.
So he can trail.
Pull really well.
Pull, yeah, the chariots. And,
so they can work for many, many hours without getting tired.
And they have a very strong hoof too.
Can they run for a long time? Are they, excellent endurance animals?
Yeah. They have a good cardiac rhythm.
Yeah, their heart.
Yeah,
very strong hearts.
Very strong hearts. And they can endure the physical actions. They can resist to the cold, to the heat. They can live in the desert, in the mountain, everywhere.
So they're very special.
Yeah.
At long last, Scorpus gets what he has dreamt of: proper instruction. The stable decides to give him a big build-up. For the owner, it's a gamble with an uncertain outcome, yet it may yield enormous gains. Seen in today's terms, a victorious champion is a multi-million-dollar asset for his stable.
Get off.
What's wrong?
Just get off. Hey, you. Yes, you. Come here.
I have to finish this.
That can wait. Get onto the chariot. Let's go.
Scorpus has made it. Taking the reins, he also takes charge of his own future. Now it's up to him whether this path will lead to success and finally freedom. For a slave, it's a 1 in a million opportunity.
Once I was like you. You must learn to read and write. A slave you may be, but your heart is free.
"2,000 years on in England, the replica of the ancient chariot is about to be put to the test.
This is the sports car I've always dreamed of. This is a sleek racing machine. Just look at these curves, the curve of the rail, the sinewy curve of the pole. I mean, these are the aesthetics that we admire in a racing car. I mean, I want to get in it. And suddenly now, inhabiting the space, it's already starting to tell me things. This is not like the Ben-Hur chariots. This is not like any other chariot I've driven, where you have a high rail up here. Up here, without any protection. That's really Roman, really pushing the theatre of the occasion. When I saw it schematically, I thought, oh, well, you know, you've got to be in and I'll rest against this front rail. That's all wasted space behind. Nobody wastes anything on a design like this. And then I think of the mosaics and the art, and actually you tend to see them back here. And that's now starting to make sense, because I look at where the axle is beneath my feet. If I'm back here, then I'm going to be lifting that weight off the horses' necks. That's going to be like taking the brakes off to let them surge forward. What about this little front rail, though? It's stopping the dust being kicked into my eyes. And going round a corner or losing my balance, if I do fall, I'm going to drop to one knee. It catches me. For that purpose, it's the height it should be.
The horses are harnessed in line with ancient illustrations. Yet there is a decisive difference to the usual practice.
The way regular horse and carriage works is you've either got the horse between two wooden shafts, which come down here, either side of the horse, or you've got a horse collar or a breast harness, which attach to the chariot with a strap called a trace. So this would attach to the vehicle, see, and that's what they pull with. They pull on this. There's nothing to attach it to here. The Romans and early chariot cultures did not have these straps. The yoke and pole system simply pulled from the center. And without these straps, you can see there's nothing to hold the horse's hindquarters in. So I drive off without this strap, and this can easily happen. We can get a horse coming over like that, and you can see, if we're galloping along, what a muddle that would be.
A further handicap the charioteers had to overcome.
Let's give it a go. All right, lads, walk on. Get up, Seamus. There we go. Good lads. Trot on. Trot. Trot, trot.
On the sand track of the Circus Maximus, the chariots would reach speeds of up to 40 miles per hour. An enormous strain on man, beast, and material. The replica has passed the test with flying colors.
Oh! Good lads. Well, that was thrilling. I mean, to drive two magnificent horses like that at speed. I found it great standing at the back of the chariot here, just behind the axle there, so I'm lifting the weight off their backs, letting them use their power and go on. And I found that my feet were pushing into the sides. And that actually gave me a good bit of stability. And I also found myself really leaning back on them, just like we see in some of the mosaics. The real challenge of driving without traces is to keep your horses parallel. And that can only be done with training, training, training.
The exercises started with driving with 2 horses, driving with 4 horses. It was very difficult to train that. And when you had the ability, the skill ability to do everything, then after a few years you could go to the arena for your first race.
Scorpus, come quick. There's been an accident.
What happened?
I got careless. Go to Rome and win a race for me. Do it for me, Scorpus, my boy. Take this along.
Death is a charioteer's constant companion. Their life is at risk in every race, and there are several of them on each day of the games. Marshall poetically describes the fate of many a driver, as often enough they have a premature encounter with the black horses of the racetrack. Yet it's a risk the men willingly accept for fame, wealth, and the prospect of freedom. Scorpus has finished his training as a charioteer. There is but one place to go now. Rome. It will become the stage for a comet-like rise to stardom. Part 2 of The Greatest Race follows Scorpus's career as the darling of the Circus Maximus and will reveal further secrets of ancient racing.
This is a completely different sensation.
The races would have been very violent.
Their traces can still be found.
This is the crucial point where the race is won or lost.
The Roman entertainment business reveals its astonishing details, as well as its dark side.
You could pay someone to put a curse on the rival team.
A glimpse behind the scenes
Scorpus.
of the ancient equivalent of Formula One. Ancient Rome, around 90 AD. It's a time of legendary heroes, notorious emperors, and gigantic spectacles.
Chariot racing was by far the most popular sport in ancient Rome.
As passed down by many ancient sources. They also tell of the rise of a young slave who became a superstar.
The charioteer's name is inscribed. Scorpus, who rose up from slavery and achieved immortality.
Scorpus nurtures the dream of many slaves.
One of the distinctive features of slavery in Rome is that a slave had a possibility of freedom.
A career as charioteer could provide the means to become a free man.
Go to Rome and win a race for me. Do it for me, Scorpus, my boy.
Scorpus becomes Rome's darling. A life in the fast lane that fascinates even today.
This is a completely different sensation.
Inside the boiling cauldron of the Circus Maximus,
The races would have been very violent.
their traces can still be found.
This is the crucial point where the race is won or lost.
The Roman entertainment business reveals its astonishing details, as well as its dark side.
You could pay someone to put a curse on the rival team.
A glimpse behind the scenes
Scorpus.
of the ancient equivalent of Formula One. Ancient Rome, around 90 AD, a metropolis with nearly 1 million inhabitants. Back then, there's nothing like it throughout Europe. An overwhelming experience for the young charioteer.
People coming to Rome from the countryside would be stunned to see the baths, the entertainment places, the many-storied buildings in which people lived. Just the noise and the different languages. It was really quite an amazing city to live in.
But there are also unpleasant sides to the empire's capital.
When we think of Rome, we tend to think of the great classical buildings with their clean white marble, but the reality would have been much grubbier. There were very few toilets, for example, so the city must have smelt. There are records of people going to the loo behind imperial statues. So the reality was far grubbier and messier.
Among all the impressive sights of this megacity, there is one place that takes away the breath of every first-time visitor. The Circus Maximus. From the stands, up to 150,000 spectators cheer on their heroes. It's the ultimate stage for champions, and the goal for those who strive to become one. Like Scorpus.
Charioteering was the most popular spectacle in Rome. And the emperors exported the charioteering to other cities, Roman cities in the empire. Everywhere we found circuses where the races were held.
Chariot racing was the export hit of Rome's entertainment business, and traces of its impact can still be found in many parts of the empire. For instance, in Carthage, in today's Tunisia. Archaeologist Ralph Bockmann from the German Archaeological Institute and his team have unearthed parts of the ancient circus.
We're in the Circus of Carthage, the biggest circus outside of Rome. We're standing on the arena floor itself. So you have to imagine that over this floor, the horses were running at a high speed. In the back, you have the spectators, 70, 80,000 people lining all the circus over hundreds of meters, booing, cheering for their chariot. This is the end of the spina itself, this semicircle, and in front of it, you see the meta. It's the turning point for the chariots. You have to imagine 3 big cones standing on there so that the charioteers can see them from far away, then they know where they have to do this crucial turn. It's a 180-degree turn. The closer you get to the spina, the more dangerous it gets, right? If your wheel touches it, you might fall over, you might turn over. So this is the crucial point where the race is won or lost.
But the excavation not only reveals architectural details, there are also objects in the debris which tell of everyday life back then. Just like today, you could buy merchandise and souvenirs in the ancient stadiums.
People would maybe, with this dice, play some games in between the races. So this artifact comes from our excavation in the part of the spectators' ranks of the cavea, and it's interesting because it seems to be part of a vessel. It's probably the upper part, and it looks like a little rider. That's why we find it very fitting for the circus.
Charioteers became huge celebrities, and people would want memorabilia about them. They would buy little lamps that might have images of them or of their horses on them. So it's a real big business.
The Roman circus is far more than a spectacular venue for chariot racing. It's also a considerable economic factor for Imperial Rome. The largest shopping mall of the ancient world extends over more than 3/4 of a mile and is open to the public even when there are no races on. So throughout the year, the circus is a center of attraction for Rome's population.
There's a whole infrastructure around the race and the racetrack. You had shops, you had entertainment, you could bet on the races, you could buy cushions, you could buy drinks, you could buy food, you could buy clothes, you could buy everything actually, including prostitutes.
During the day, the Circus Maximus provides a magnificent facade for the games. But at night, it turns into a dangerous place. In the countless taverns, shady figures and gamblers hang about. Prostitutes accost customers. It's a red light district where many a provincial visitor gets fleeced. Sex for money is an established feature of Roman society. Prices are low and attract many customers. The emperor even feels obliged to impose a minimum age for streetwalkers. Though not officially ostracized, high society looks down on them, as they do on the charioteers. In contrast to prostitution, gambling is prohibited in ancient Rome. Various emperors have introduced dicing laws to curtail the ruinous consequences of gambling. Alas, without success. In the dim taverns around the circus, a gambler will always find company. But Scorpus has greater aims.
Even for charioteers who made it to Rome, only a select few would have actually been able to race in the Circus Maximus, as it was the ultimate venue.
Go! Go!
Those who want to go up in the world have to stand out from the crowd.
Come on! Maxi, go! Go!
Since agents throughout the empire sent hundreds of young talents to Rome. In the training camps of the various stables, they must prove themselves.
Throw him out!
And beat their competitors.
He's useless! He's a dud! Throw him out!
was a highly competitive environment, and the profession of chariot racing was highly physically demanding.
Domitian's enthusiasm for chariot racing is legendary. The emperor does not miss a chance to look for new talent. In the eyes of the Romans, nothing could throw more splendor on their ruler than the fame of a successful charioteer, whose career the emperor himself has promoted.
Choose young Scorpus.
I choose him. Don't smile at me, slave. You could end up dead on the track.
Death smiles to us all. All I can do is smile back.
Yeah. Oh. Well.
From now on, the career of Scorpus is linked to one of the great stables. The Romans call them factiones, the factions of the circus. They are among the most influential enterprises of the Roman world.
The factions were the four big stables who controlled chariot racing. So they sourced the horses, they paid for the chariots, they actually found and trained the charioteers, and they put it all together in the show itself.
The four stables are named by their colours: the blues, the greens, the reds, and the whites. The colours have a symbolic meaning. They stand not only for the 4 seasons, but also for various gods as their patron saints. The respective colours will also be worn by the charioteers, and of course, by their fans during the races. By and by, the circus factions have gained so much economic power that they have become a political factor, reaching well beyond the entertainment business. Like today's Formula One, the ancient stables need all sorts of highly specialized personnel.
You have the whole faction stable, which is just an incredible industry hierarchy, sort of beehive of workers. You have the stable managers who are in charge of the whole operation. You have their assistants, you have the trainers, you have grooms working with the horses, you have veterinarians and doctors, you have the chariot makers, the harness makers, the blacksmiths. And then you have the senior charioteers and the junior charioteers and the apprentices all working together.
The factions were big business. They're effectively a kind of contractor that the emperor would pay to put on the show on his behalf. So there's a lot of money involved in paying for the charioteers, in paying for the horses, in feeding them, in all the training that has to go on. So it's a real, almost industrial size exercise.
And so these factions then gain so much power that they dictate the prices they charge, right? They dictate what it costs to rent their horses, to rent their drivers, to have them for a day on the track. And the officials, the magistrates who were running these games, they had to kowtow to these factions to get what they needed.
And as in today's racing milieu, marketing experts, agents, and impresarios are gallivanting about, all and always on the take. As the racing season draws closer, the influence of the stables grows, since the promoters are under increasing pressure to stage a memorable show. And the prime promoter, in the eyes of the people, is the emperor.
Factions knew they could charge what they wanted. And so there is this one story that there was a senior official who wanted to put on horse races, and the factions were just asking an exorbitant amount of money, so much he's like, I can't pay that, that is ridiculous, so he threatened to run dogs.
But money isn't really the problem when it comes to staging the games.
Your business?
We must speak to the Emperor.
Why?
It's about the race.
The stable's bosses know exactly which card to play.
Well, we need more money.
Scum! We have given you more than enough.
Well, the thing is, what we've got is just enough to run dogs, not horses.
You must be out of your minds. The crowd will go mad.
That's the reason we are here.
The threat works. On no account can the Emperor afford to cancel the chariot races merely to save costs. It will be an unprecedented loss of face for the ruler. The representatives of the circus factions are quite aware of this, and so they brazenly put the squeeze on him.
So take this and get out. Heed my advice. Dare this again, and I'll make you pay. Out.
Scorpus is fortunate to have ended up with the Greens, the most successful stable of its time. A veritable entertainment machine, and its managers are familiar with all the tricks of the trade. And of course, they know how to stage the most spectacular four-horse races. A four in hand calls for highly specialized drivers and horses, and there is an astonishing detail.
Romans certainly had two-horse chariot races, but they were junior league. The real Grand Prix was the four-horse race. This is still the engine. They're being pulled by the yoke because the outside horses are only being attached at the head. They are not pulling the chariot at all. You've just got, on either side, a loose horse attached at the head.
So the charioteer has little control over the two outside horses. Nevertheless, he must make the beasts run in parallel.
So many bits of leather. Challenge, but okay. Walk on, lads. Off you go. Go on. Walk on.
The Romans adored and admired the racehorses almost as much as their drivers. A Christian author once complained that while the Romans could recite the names of their best racehorses, when asked about the number of the apostles of Christ, they wouldn't know the answer. For Mike Loads, the Romans' passion for horses is most understandable.
This is a completely different sensation. There's a different energy in the horses. You can feel that different energy. This is how they would be in the wild, in a herd, in a stampede. Fanned out like this, not politely one behind the other. And you really feel that, and it makes a difference to how you can control them, let alone the fact that those outside horses, there is no attachment to the chariot at all. So trying to keep them all straight is really challenging, especially on the bends. There's so many bits of leather. You need to keep this one short so he's turning around like that, and let this one out so he's going around the outside, and make sure you're not ignoring the middle two who are the engine and doing all the pulling. So many things. It's really, really challenging. The question remains, why four horses? It's not as fast as two. It's certainly no faster than two. It's harder to drive. So why did they do four? Well, I think that it's about theatre. It's about spectacle. The Circus Maximus was a theatre. It was sporting entertainment. And it delivered spectacle in three ways: majesty, supremacy, and jeopardy.
For Scorpus, the day of his first race has arrived. The whole of Rome dresses up for the games. In the palaces and villas of the mighty and the rich, in the tenement houses and alleys, there is only one topic on a day like this. Who is going to win? One of the famous names, or maybe a newcomer who nobody yet knows?
Go to Rome and win a race for me. Do it for me, Scorpus, my boy. Take this along.
Domitian too carefully prepares for his appearance in the circus. For the general population, the races are the only opportunity to set eyes on their emperor.
The emperors have to be careful. Emperors who were supposed to be too chummy with charioteers or other performers were looked down upon by the elite. On the other hand, there clearly is an element of reflected glory, so giving favours to charioteers could also win you favour with the people, but you don't want to look too friendly, and also you've got to look in several directions. You want to have the people on your side, but you've also got to keep the elite on your side as well.
And people in Rome had not a good life. They were poor, also the free people. And when they could go to the circus, that was for them the escape from their narrow existence.
It's quite likely that family members could go together in a way they perhaps couldn't to the other spectacle races. So fathers and sons could have sat together, pointing out all the finer features of the races.
On the day of the races, about 150,000 Romans watched the procession of the Pompa move up to the circus. Some estimates even suggest the number of spectators may have been as many as 250,000. Certainly, no modern-day stadium could accommodate such a crowd. Prior to the event, a religious ceremony is held.
In addition to the religious gods, there were the gods of the circus themselves, that is, the charioteers.
Scorpus finally sees his dream come true, but will he fulfill the expectations of his stable, his sponsor? And not least, the emperor himself. But before the races are on, another event is keeping the visitors in suspense. The lottery. Sometimes it's only fruits and foodstuffs which are thrown into the audience. More popular by far are the lottery balls, with the prospect of fabulous prizes.
The lottery took the form of small wooden balls which were thrown into the crowd, and when an audience member caught them, he or she would open them up to find a prize inscribed inside.
This might just be a few birds or a small pot of money, or it might be a whole house or even an estate in the countryside. And you can imagine the frantic scrambling that would have gone on to get hold of these things, and probably the huge number of injuries that would happen in the crush.
But not all recipients find their prizes useful and beg the emperor for an exchange.
Have mercy on me, O Caesar. A ship? To go to war with? What for shall I use it?
Alas, he may not be in the mood.
What should I do with it?
Tension mounts. In a few seconds, the charioteers would charge onto the track of the Circus Maximus. Amidst a frantic roar of cheers from a crowd of more than 100,000 spectators.
Chariot racing could be seen by far more spectators than could get into the Colosseum, and it happened far more often, perhaps as almost once a week. So they're popular across society and their influence spreads out across the Roman world.
In the ruins of Carthage, once the site of the second largest circus of the empire, archaeologists have found spectacular images highlighting the aura that once surrounded the charioteers.
This is a fascinating mosaic because it's composed of these squares that depict circus horses. We don't know who the mosaic was made for, whether it was made for a charioteer who, was wealthy and decided to have this made to commemorate his career, whether it was a patron of the circus, so someone who provided funds or horses for the circus, or whether it was just a massive fan of the circus. They just loved it. It's the equivalent of putting up posters of your favorite sports stars or sports jerseys to recollect, like this is your hobby, this is your passion. It may not be your living, but it's what you do in your spare time. And so this is another fascinating insight into the role that the circus played in everyday life in the Roman world.
Throughout the Roman world, archaeologists have come across relics of a civilization permeated by the spirit of the races. They not only determined everyday life, but even gained an importance in the world beyond. A sarcophagus adorned with cupids, messengers of the god of love who is often portrayed as a child. What's special about this one? The cupids are charioteers. The scene is a virtual snapshot of a race. One detail, also known from mosaics, is of particular interest. The signals by which the number of rounds is displayed. The dolphins. Immediately prior to the race, so-called sponsores dappled the stadium ground with water to reduce the dust that would be stirred up by the horses. All eyes are now set on the starting gates.
You had starting gates for the reds, the blues, the whites and the greens. Mostly 2 or 3 of one stable against others. So 4, 8 or 12 charioteers.
It's the moment Scorpus has been looking forward to for years. The race will last only a few minutes, but it will decide his future. Like most Romans, the charioteers too are highly superstitious and carry charms to summon up miraculous powers. But once the emperor has started the race, courage and skill are all that counts. For 350 meters, the chariots speed along the spina, the partition wall separating the track into 2 halves. After a 180-degree bend, the chariots race back in the opposite direction.
It wasn't all about speed, it was a question of tactics. If you could take the inner line, then your horses had to race a much shorter distance. Above all, it was about turning the turning posts really tightly because it was easy to lose control of the 4 horses and for them to take a really wide berth.
On average, the chariots run with a speed of about 25 miles per hour. It's all over after 8 to 9 minutes. On the other hand, in this way, up to 22 thrilling events can be offered to the spectators in a single day.
To do 7 laps of the Circus Maximus is about 3.5 miles. Now that means it can't be a sprint. If you try to just charge away for that far, your horses would soon run out of energy. So it means that the race was all about pacing yourself, controlling your horses, avoiding the pitfalls, and then timing your run.
Fair play is definitely not the order of the day. The drivers will zigzag, force their opponents out of the way, or try to outbrake them. It's a no-holds-barred affair.
The races would have been hugely competitive, very violent, lots of jostling for position, and the charioteers would often cheat. All of which was trying to make the opponents lose control of their horses and of getting themselves into a better tactical position.
The turning points of the spine, called meti, are marked by mighty pillars. The rounds are counted by lowering signals, which are designed like dolphins. They are a bow to Neptune, the water god, since he is not only lord of the fishes, but of the horses too. There's hardly a race where all charioteers will pass the finishing line.
Charioteers had to be hugely strong. What they would do to control the horses is actually wrap the reins around their torso, and then they would use the weight of their body to actually force the horses to turn round the tight turning posts. But it also meant it was very dangerous, that if there was any kind of crash, then they would be pulled out of the vehicle and they would still be tied to these loose horses by the rein.
It's mostly at the turning points that collisions occur. Chariots somersault through the air, horses fall, drivers are trampled over or dragged to their death. Consideration is not a virtue you expect from a charioteer. Scorpus drives home his first victory.
This time you won, slave. Next time, you will end up dead on the track.
Death is the only freedom a slave knows.
Victory in the Circus Maximus for a charioteer could be a life-changing event. It could bring him wealth, fame, and adoring fans.
But as always, fame also evokes envy. A frustrated marshal notes, "How long have I to hang about this bunch of fearful servants and minions for a few hundred shabby coins, while Scorpus, in one single hour, carries away 15 bags filled to the brim with gold?"
Most Romans would have lived off 1,000 sesterces or less per year, and that would have had to feed a family of 4 and clothe them and buy oil and wine and other things they wanted. So for a charioteer to win 15,000 sesterces was a huge sum of money by an average man's standards.
It's the beginning of a fabulous career, which over the years sees Scorpus join the ranks of the miliarii, charioteers with more than 1,000 victories. He will become the most successful driver of the Flavian era and a celebrated idol.
Scorpus won 2,048 races in his 10-year career. Now, he must have been racing then in 5,000 or 6,000 races, which meant he was probably racing 500 or 600 times a year, 10 times a week. He's out there risking his life on a very regular basis, but it also means that because he's successful, he's winning a lot of money, and he would start thinking of trying to buy his freedom.
Now you are a free man.
As is customary in Rome, Scorpus is released from slavery in a legislative act in the presence of his former owner.
Why, you might think, would his owner let him buy his freedom? Well, because they wanted to keep the charioteer incentivized. They wanted to keep him winning races for their stable. So they would allow him to buy his freedom, and he would then probably have got a bigger cut of the prize money. But in all of this, both sides were still benefiting. The stables were still winning races, still winning prize money, and so was Scorpus.
The release of slaves was quite a common occurrence in Rome. Ancient tombs bear witness to this practice. They also prove that the freedmen stood a good chance of rising within Roman society.
Here we are at the tomb of P. Quinctius T.L. Liber. In other words, the tomb of Publius Quinctius, the freedman of Titus, who was a bookseller. The L after his name tells us that he was a libertus, that is, a freed slave. He was able to overcome the shackles of slavery and eventually become a successful professional, buying his freedom. And so we see in the cases of freedmen, like Publius Quinctius, the opportunities that they had to achieve higher social mobility and even wealth and independence. This is like the story of Scorpus in the sense that he would have risen up from the shackles of slavery, but he achieved a level of wealth and greatness and fame that this bookseller could have never even imagined.
Yet the finer people still look down on charioteers.
Charioteers themselves are in this sort of ambivalent position in Roman society. Like all performers, they're officially classed as infames, we would say infamous. They don't get the protection of the Roman state. They're not citizens. And so even if they were very successful, very famous, were being feted by the populace, maybe invited to dinner parties, they wouldn't have been accepted as one of us by the social elite.
And just like today, there were the hooligans. But back then, they didn't merely resort to violence. They would also call up supernatural powers.
The Romans saw religion everywhere, and they were, by our standards, very superstitious. They used magic a lot to try and influence the outcomes of events. And so it made perfect sense for them to do that on the chariot racing as well.
It's quite common to buy a curse directed at the driver, as well as at the horses of an opposing team. Officially, the practice may be banned, but in the crooked alleys of the poorer quarters, there's no problem getting what you want.
Scorpus must die.
You just need to find a sorcerer who will record the curse on a little leaden plate and then cast his magical powers upon it.
One of the most intriguing aspects of the social and cultural life of the circus is the issue of the curse tablets, which have been found in association with several of the circuses across the Roman Empire.
In today's Israel, in the Circus of Herod near Caesarea, archaeologists found about 60 of these curse panels in a well. At first sight, the plates, the size of a banknote, seem to be blank. But this appearance is deceptive. State-of-the-art photography brings their secrets to light. A succession of exposures at different angles reveals what is written on them. Bind them and blind them and throw them into the dust. Distract their run and make them fail the bend.
The way it works in the circus games is that you could pay someone to put a curse on the rival team. You would often do this in a great deal of detail. One of the curse tablets found not only names the charioteers in the rival team, but also names their mothers. In order to make the curse tablets work, there are various ways you want it to be more effective. Being buried underground in association with kind of the underground powers. They've also been found at particularly significant places in the circus itself. The turning posts, for example, and the starting gates, because they're the places where accidents are most likely to happen. They've also been found near cemeteries. Again, in association with the sort of underworld close to circuses. So you want to bury them in a place where they'll have the best chance of achieving what you want.
And there's yet another discovery. In one of the rolled up plates, the scientists found sage, which obviously had been wrapped in with a purpose. The Greek word for sage is sphakos. Phonetically, it's similar to the word sphakilos, which means trembling or wriggling, and as in sphakalismos, describes a disease. The phonetic similarity between the herb and the disease is supposed to enhance the effectiveness of the curse. Which explains the sage in the plate.
Scorpus, Svakos, Svakilipus, Svakos, Svakilipus.
The fanatical followers of the respective circus factions will stop at nothing to intimidate or unnerve the opposing teams.
Scorpus, may your horses drop dead in the dust of the circus. And may you die with them. This curse be upon you. Death to you!
And time and again, in the nights before the races, hooligans flock together to mob the stables of their opponents. Violent confrontations between the fans in and outside the circus are a common occurrence. At times, there are even fatalities, as recorded by ancient historians. The emperors may try to keep the violence under control, but to enforce a ban on fan clubs is unthinkable.
Don't worry, everything's gonna be all right.
Every charioteer knows that someday he will meet his fate. At 27, Scorpus has logged more than 2,000 victories. But this time, he's no longer in the protective hands of the gods. The greatest idol of his time dies in the sand of the racecourse. Martial lets Scorpus deliver his own obituary. O Rome, I am Scorpus, the splendor of your clamorous circus, your early deceased darling. The envious goddess of destiny who cut my thread of life probably believed, when she counted my victories, I were an old man. One year after Scorpus, Domitian, his patron and admirer, also dies. The last emperor of the Flavian dynasty falls victim to an assassination.
In contrast to a charioteer like Scorpus, who rose up from slavery and achieved immortality, the Emperor Domitian was consigned to the dustbin of history.
The legacy of a fascinating era lives on, in stadiums and on racetracks throughout the world.